Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome back to Third Culture Convos. Thanks for joining us again. Today, we have a very interesting topic that converges a whole bunch of different things into, I feel like, one example of how things can converge into one different thing, a la Third Culture Kid. So, just to prime our discussion, gentlemen, we're talking about the writers' strike and the Hollywood strike. The Actors Guild and the Writers Guild are striking. Just for some facts, the Writer Guild of America, representing about 11,500 screenwriters, went on strike on May 2nd, 2023 over an ongoing labor dispute with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. So that means the producers, the execs, are going up against the screenwriters. The strike has been ongoing for now 70 days and has significantly impacted Hollywood's production plans. All production has stopped on every movie that they're making right now. And then the actors, of course, have jumped on because their contracts are up too. And so it's become a part of a general Hollywood strike. The main issues causing these strikes are related to funding, job security for writers, disagreements over new contracts, and concerns about the use of artificial intelligence in creative projects. Another interesting factoid about all this is that the rise of the streaming services has led to increased spending on original content, but writers and actors feels that they're not being adequately compensated. They're demanding improvements in compensation, including increases in minimum pay and residuals for streaming. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is streaming. This has led to a huge impact on the industry. The strike has led to delays in movies and shows, and even the walkout of actors from premieres. It has thrown Hollywood into turmoil and could potentially reshape the industry. So in this episode, we're going to dive deeper into these issues. We're going to explore the impact of the strike on the film and television industry, the role of artificial intelligence in creative projects, the future of Hollywood, and the complexities of streaming rights and payments to writers and actors. Wasn't that
Wow.
succinct? Yeah, you're very welcome. We should just end this now.
A lot of convergence.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what's so interesting, I think, about this topic is that there is a lot of convergence, and that's why I'm actually very excited about talking about this because you're not necessarily just so my natural inclination and tendency when I talk about strikes and workers, I feel like I'm always on the side of the workers. There's nothing that there's nothing that they would be asking that I feel would be unreasonable, and any attempt to make the workers look like the bad guys is usually like propaganda by the owning class or the producers and the execs who I feel like you can easily like remove from the formula of making films and the films will be made just fine. Right? Like they do some things, but the writers and actors are much more important than the execs and the producers who maybe they're I might be wrong on that, right? So that's my first kind of crazy major assertion, is that you can kind of remove one side of the agenda. So I'm always if I'm for the workers, and I feel like AI is a sideshow to the actual debate as opposed to the actual debate, because I think that the real debate is about the streaming. And you know how like all of the streaming services, they're notoriously I think if you look at Netflix's like story, right? So Netflix gets first thing there are no other streaming services. So they get like rights to stream all these shows. They notoriously spent like a whole bunch of money to stream Friends, and like they get all these rights to all these shows. But now all the competitor streaming services open up, HBO Max, Hulu, yada. And so the shows, they have to make their own shows. But to make their own shows, they're making their own shows and they're funding the production of these own shows. And but they're getting their funds from their like stock prices, right? Because the stock prices are high, so they get the money, and so they make these shows on a loss. And they notoriously don't share the streaming numbers. So they don't tell anybody which shows are popular, which are not, and using this like crazy loophole where if a show is I'm giving you such a summary. If a show is a failure, and you pull the show, like you cancel the show, it's a tax deductible show because it's considered a loss, as opposed to just letting it stay, and then it would be like, "Oh, no, it worked out, so you gotta pay tax on it." And so the execs and the producers are like, "All right, let's just and especially with Netflix because they have to make so much content because they're not HBO. They don't have a library of historical shows to lean on. So they have to make as many shows as possible. Some will hit, some will miss, some will stick. They need them to be as short as possible so that they're not too expensive because the sixth season of a successful show, actors get paid like 10x what they were paid at the film. And so it makes the show way more expensive. And so you don't want the show to be that successful. You don't want it to be like a Game of Thrones 6 season, 7 season blockbuster. And so all of this kind of comes into play and is falling on, and now it's coming up to the negotiating table, where I think it's also important to note that most of the writers that we just mentioned, that I mentioned here, and also most of Hollywood actors they don't make that much money, right? Like a majority of the funds are at the top 1%, 2%, 3% of those groups, the writers and the actors, but a majority of people who work in that industry sucks. It's a tough life. And so that's what's going on. There's a big bomb going on over there. And I think what happens here has a big effect on everything else.
So I just want to jump in quickly and say what you're saying about the streaming aspect of things, that's very true for the actor's side because of their residuals and their stuff and their likeness. It's like that show Jane is Awful on Netflix. I finally watched it. And I'm like, it's interesting because really it's a bit of a warning to us as a consumer because basically it's like you accept the terms and conditions and whatever it is. And if it's in there and you didn't read it, well, shit, they can use your face however the hell
Well,
they want.
you're
They're
talking
able
about
to
the
get
Black
access
Mirror
to it.
episode. You're talking about the
Episode,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But in terms of like the likeness, because then you start to see like this, it showed how actors can be manipulated with their likeness in a streaming service because in Salma Hayek's what the shit? Like, I'm Salma Hayek and I'm getting crap for this, whatever type of thing. And I'm getting shit on for things that this person that I'm not even that person is doing type of thing. But then when it comes down to the writer side of things, the one thing that is huge that people probably don't see or don't know about is this thing called mini rooms, where they hire skeleton crews, like the production companies hire skeleton crews, and they get these writers to write a show, a TV series, or a screenplay in a few days. And then once they get it to the point that they like it and the production company feels like we can run with it, they get rid of them all. They don't keep them on. So there's no learning for the writers. And that's one of the biggest problems, at least from the writer side of things, that because what's going to happen? They're going to give you the basis of what it is, and they're probably going to go to AI and finish it after the fact. And so that's another big deal about this whole situation where it's just like we're being replaced by AI generated either faces or writing skills. So
What you said about if you get rid of the execs and everything will just keep running. If you just get the screenwriters and the actors together and get rid of the executives, everything will. That's very analogous to the American healthcare system with regards to hospitals. If you get rid of the actual hospital administrators and just let doctors and nurses do their thing, things will be a lot better off than the margins and the revenues and the Wall Street expectations that kick in through these executives, right? Like they are basically the HR version or the liaison to the stakeholders. So their ultimate priority is the stakeholder. It's not the end user or the employees or anyone else. It is strictly the stakeholders. And for that, stakeholder means profits and Wall Street. And it is just weird, though, that it is completely analogous to the American healthcare system, where if you removed executives from hospitals, you'd be fine.
I think I'd argue that okay. Executives, totally. Admin staff, you can cut them, right? There was I think I saw a picture of a question that was asked to ChatGPT, which was which the job of executive producer and the job of writer, which could you better replace? Which could AI be a better replacement for? Which I think is a loaded question. And it gave the answer that, of course, it would, like, the writer, there's a lot more nuance, there's a lot more going on that you actually kind of need a human to be the lead on. But with the executive job, nah, you could probably you could replace that person. Like, a lot of those people, and even though most of the pay ends up there at the exec level, right? Like, at the producer level, I probably why the negotiation, like, really matters is for the execs is it's another one. I mean, I feel they always find a way around this. Execs are a sneaky bunch, right? They always find a way, because I was just thinking about the banking system and too big to fail and bailout, and they do big bailout, too big to fail, and then they say, okay, banks can't get this big again, and they put all this legislation to make banks not be able to get big again. But what it ends up doing is blocking smaller banks from becoming big, and it makes the big banks even bigger. And nobody learns that lesson. Nobody learns that lesson. It's business as usual. And in these negotiations, the execs, whenever the light is shined on them, they behave accordingly, right? They behave, oh, wait, we got to hide this, we got to show this. And that's how even the hiding of the streaming numbers, if let's say they share their streaming numbers and let's say they all sucked, right? Share price drops. And what's the ultimate measure for an executive team? It's the share price, right? What's the stock price looking like? What's the ticker looking like? And so you hide things that can make that number volatile or make that go lower because you want that number to be high and to keep growing. And why? So that you can and this is what's crazy. So you can subsidize the losses that you are incurring in order to produce a volume of shows in order to remain relevant and to keep your doors open. There was another very interesting thing that I saw that was tied to this and tied to Uber, is that because it's a share price and it's a tech company, and it shoots the share price up, and I don't, this might be wrong. I mean, I could be wrong, but because it shoots the share price up and they're able to raise a lot of funds and operate on a loss on an annual basis for 10 or 15 years, that loss that they're operating under, that's subsidized by the funds that they are raising, cannibalizes an existing industry that does not operate on a loss, and then when the funds dry up, when the game is up, now you have the original industry destroyed, and you have a bunch of Uber drivers walking around making $5 an hour, right? Like, driving around and the company saying, "Hey, we never promised you shit. we we're just giving you we're trying to make the world a better place," right? And so that story is happening, and I could easily put myself in the shoes of I feel like a big exec, and I'm playing with words, and I go, "Oh man, the AI can do this. It can produce 50,000 ideas an hour for shows. Why do I need a whole team of people sitting in a room, right? Coming up with
Because you still need someone to sift through it and decide what you're going to do.
But I'm an exec.
Which idea are you going to go with?
But I'm the exec. Ultimately, I make that choice anyway. Like, ultimately, that it is up to me. Like, I get I get a sheet of paper. It has a bunch of ideas. Run this one, don't run this one. I'm so smart.
Yeah. And then you're going to decide your idea and say, fine, chat GPT, this is the idea. Now write me a season.
Run with it. Yeah.
What if you that's exactly the plan, is what if you replaced middle management with 10 interns who all day long, all they're doing is chat GPT this, chat GPT that, AI this, AI that.
And because the interns, you don't have to pay them.
So if you offered me, exactly why I use the word intern or that position, because if you offered anyone an intern position at the creative part of Universal or of Warner or of Disney, you're telling me they won't take it, even put up with it for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you get to put that on your thing.
Oh,
And-
if you're at that starting level, absolutely you would take it. But the problem is now, if you look at the industry and say, well, what's my future?
That's where,
And that's the
like,
problem, right? Now, that's what the
Well,
problem is
no,
now.
but
What's
I
my
think
future after
I
this?
think
After I'm
you're
interning and working for free for 2 years, now what?
but
How would I get paid?
you know what they tell you, right? You're so lucky. Do you know how much experience you're gonna get
Oh
by
yeah.
working on this show? And then maybe you'll be able to add it even onto your the golden resume, right? You can add all that writer on. Oh damn, big moves. And so they give you that promise of all of these skills that you're gonna gain, all of these things you're gonna get, and they'll and you're supposed to be grateful for it. And if you're not, I don't have time for that kind of attitude.
and that's what the crazy part is. Like in all of this, what we are missing out on is the fact that people are asking you, an entire industry is asking for more money. Working people are asking for more money. And what's really telling is usually CNN and Fox would be all over this kind of thing. Anything happens in Hollywood and they're all over it. But for this, the strike, if you follow the news, they're not following it closely. You'll see a headline, you'll see an update, you'll see one or two things, sure, on a daily basis, but they're not covering this in full because they don't want to wake up the workers. This could be a really big inflection point in terms of
But
even
I
going forward. What you said, Rashid, about going forward. 1 second. About going forward. The culture of movies and the way people will make movies from now on might be completely different because they will be far more labor friendly, worker friendly in terms of storylines, in terms of actual culture. This is what I mean. The soft power within the product may eventually, because, for example, one of the things that really grinds my gears is that we see in movies, especially these days, you'll see struggling families and financially poor people on screen, but you'll never see a bank account ticker. Because in real life, as someone who has been poor, broke, and struggling and still is, that $20 that was in my bank account in the morning goes down to zero by 12 in the noon very quickly. Whereas in the movies, that $20 seems to go last for a month. And that might not be the case anymore. They might really start writing in financial impoverishment and insecurity, financial insecurity. Go ahead, Ross.
what you were saying about CNN or news outlets covering the strike or discussing the strike, I think there's a part of it where they technically can't because of the strike order itself and what it encompasses. So it depends on what your role is in the media. I think if based on what your role is, it's crossing a picket line. So me, for example, if I'm going to the airport, if I'm going to work and there's a unionized group that's not my union, but another unionized group that's picketing, technically, because my union supports another union's right to strike, I can't cross that picket line. So I think there's something similar in that sense where they can't really discuss it because of the relationships of unions and supporting strikes and that kind of stuff.
What do you mean when you say can't? So who says you can't cross that picket line? Like, where
It's
does
out
that?
it would be outlined in what the strike encompasses from what the strike group has said. We are striking because of XYZ. And then if you're in a particular union, you're not in the same union,
Yeah.
but if your union's policies dictates that you can't do anything or say anything that's related to this other strike because we are supporting it quietly, then you can't discuss it or do anything about it, or else you might be in violation of our union guidelines.
And I don't think any of the networks that are covering it would ever be for the writers or the actors. So like I get what you're saying, but I don't think that's the case because I've read enough on CNN or on these other websites to see that they are covering it. They're just not focusing on it. They are mentioning things. They are talking about it, but they're not fully, because again, that is specifically for writers and actors that are on strike, not the entire entertainment industry per se.
No, I know what I'm saying is that I'm just saying let's say hypothetically speaking, someone who's a part of the writing crew at one of the news outlets, for example, I mean, they probably just take something off Associated Press wire and rewrite it, fine, whatever. But the point is, I think they probably still have restrictions as to what they can say and how far they can go with it, as apart from just saying pure facts. X number of people are on strike type of thing, as opposed to saying bullshit or I agree with it.
That would be a first in America, period, that you're like, I don't buy it. And I think that's the thing. That's exactly it's clear every time there's a labor movement, there's no coverage of this. They don't want the regular person to demand more money for some reason. UPS people are also going to be striking soon. 340,000 of their workers will be going on strike soon, hopefully. And so that's the thing. I think it's more of a labor right kind of thing that they don't want covered. But you could be right that there might be weird, like these guys, they always manage to fill in the blanks we don't need filled in. So yeah, you could be right.
Yeah, I think it's possible that I think on the one hand, I think what you're saying, Maj, is that there's a way that the media treats labor movements. And in the US in particular, you're saying that you're making the wild claim that media companies who are also run, managed, and owned by execs who are the same cloth, that like the banker guy, like the hospital guy, like the Hollywood guy, all those execs are going to have the same agenda when it comes to labor movement, and the media is not going to dip its toes into or share any positive information in support of labor movements moving in general in the United States, like US media.
And often what's not mentioned, we think Hollywood studios, they're these cool independent shops and stuff. No, most of these, what you just mentioned, they're all under one company. They're at the end, there's one company that owns all of these different divisions. So you may have Evil Corp, to borrow Mr. Robot. Evil Corp is up there, and they have a banking division and they have an entertainment division. Within the entertainment division, there's amusement parks, Succession style, and then there's the film studios, like in real life, like
Yeah.
and all of these, like the food we eat and everything is
You're describing an octopus with many tentacles
owned by 10 or
and yeah,
grabbing
and the
you.
top, and with mergers and the game of mergers and acquisitions, and that's as power begins to, like, as certain fish get bigger, they start to eat other fish that are also big and then merge with other fish that are big, and then slowly over time, I think like this is a big. This is this inevitable?
For example, like just to fill in some muscle here, I'm on Warner Media on their Wikipedia. Warner Media was an American multinational mass media and entertainment conglomerate owned by AT&T. So you have Warner Brothers, but you also have AT&T, and these are all under the same umbrella, and they might have two different CEOs, but then there'll be one, the chief CEO, the Wizard of Oz, who we don't see who's behind
the chief of the boardroom, yeah.
And so and like within this, oh man, it's joint venture with Universal Pictures, DC Comics, New Line Cinema, CBS Entertainment Group, a 50% interest in the CW. Warner Media News and Sports consisted of the news and sports assets of Turner Broadcasting, including CNN, Turner Sports. So HBO Max is also in there. So HBO, Warner, and AT&T, these are all one company at the end of the day. And if a worker is getting paid more in California studio, then why wouldn't a worker in a New York retail store for AT&T, why shouldn't they also get more money?
Because they are fulfilling different roles. I don't know what other answer.
I think
based on your job description.
You brought up our conversation. You brought up something that's making me turn right. Okay, So bringing that up actually makes me turn right, and this is not like a devil's advocate situation, but it's something that I've been thinking about, and which is also coming to light when it comes to, let's say, workers getting paid, right? In the sense that you got so right now the Women's World Cup has just kicked off, right? Women's World Cup is in New Zealand, Australia, and there's been a lot of this is the big is this yeah this is the big sporting event of the summer, right? I don't think there's any other like major event. It's actually what was very nice about the last month.
What was happening was the under 21 Euros.
All the under 21s and under 20s and under 19s and all that type of stuff was happening. But what I was really enjoying, honestly, was the break, because since the pandemic, I feel like we've had like 2 games a day for 3 years. My dad was like, "Oh, you watching the under 20s?" I was like, "I need a break. I cannot watch any more soccer for a little while, and I need to just look outside for a second." And so, anyway, Women's World Cup is going on. Women's World Cup is down in being hosted in Australia and New Zealand. And one of the facts that came up, and I know why these facts show up, but one of the facts that came up was that they gave out 20,000 free tickets, I think, in New Zealand, because they weren't able to sell out, or they can't sell enough. They haven't been selling enough tickets in New Zealand, and so they wanted the stadium to come, obviously, to be full for the game. Like, it would be embarrassing if the stadium was empty for a Women's World Cup in New Zealand, and so New Zealand they were trying to do stuff about that. But and another thing that's happening, there's a lot of conversation happening around the Women's World Cup and like women's pay, and how not just how their pay is compared to men, but also like how much they're getting paid compared to the execs and the people that are organizing. So similar to the men's game, that conversation that's similar in the men's game, but also the difference. And one of the big conversations, or my understanding of it, is that the draw on the women's game, like the amount of money that the women's game makes, is way less than the amount. So even though, let's say men in the men's game make 1%, I don't think that's true, but let's say they make 1% of the total revenue, and women make 1% of the total revenue as well, then the women would make a significantly less amount of money than men do. That, like, just even because 1% is less of a larger pool, and the basic math. And then, but if they make 0.1% of the overall pool, which I think what is the actual case is that I think men make a higher, I'm not sure about this, but I think men make a higher percentage of the overall revenue, like the players do, in general.
Depends on it depends. Yeah. And
Yes,
it
in
really
general,
comes down. It depends on
because
how they've negotiated with their
which is what's going
association.
on in the women's game. In the women's game now,
Yeah.
they're negotiating with and they've paused their negotiations to play in the Women's World Cup. And I think for a few of the teams, that's what's been going on.
Canada's one of the situations. Yeah. There's been no agreement.
It's parallels in terms of that when we're talking about like workers. And so that's like it's where I naturally take these types of conversations when I talk about like workers versus execs, like the worker, like needing, even almost like needing to have a union in order to keep the executive committees honest. Because if the executive committees are shitty and they make bad decisions that makes the organization either make less money, or makes the industry make less money, because I think that's the whole point of the executive committee, is to be the stewards of the overall strategy and direction of the company of the industry, in order to make it profitable so that they can keep giving the service, but also make sure that the service is of high quality and that there's various options. So there are cheap movies and expensive movies. There are cheap options, and there are the most value based, like the Walmart, or the most specialized stuffs, like, I don't know, like Bose or something. I don't know.
Bed Bath and Beyond.
So that there is a wide variety. So that's what I think the mission, the idea of the true executive leadership on the top is. And when they suck at that, they too much focus just on the share price, or are sweeping up a lot of the funds due to their position in that, as being at the top of the pyramid, let's say, of the industry. then that's where unions come in and go, hey, you gotta distribute that properly so it's not all up with you. You gotta run this industry properly so that we can actually have jobs in 5 years and 10 years. But where is the interesting piece is that with like you, let's go back to the 1900s and the cars coming out, and you'll have the union of horse taxis, right? And they'll be like, this is going to take away our jobs. And then you're going to be like, on the other hand, you're like, it's not about preserving legacy jobs, right? Like, you're not necessarily like, jobs change, and what is available as jobs change, and the jobs of tomorrow are not like, we don't even know what they are. We don't know what you're being trained for. Like, one of the things is like, we taught all our kids coding, and now there's a bot that can code better than any person. And so now you're like, you don't need to code anymore. Remember all that coding that we taught you? Or we teach you how to do all like long form division, and then we give you a calculator.
I just want to go. I'm not going to be devil's advocate for the executives, but I am going to say that at some point they recognized things that people wanted. And that's when the advent of streaming services started. So things like Netflix. So there was chatter about consumers, us, annoyed with the fact that I had to wait every week for the new episode of the show that I wanted to watch, that I had to make sure I set my DVR so I can record it, whatever it is. And all of a sudden, it's, hold on a second, here's this wonderful thing called Netflix. And we're just going to put everything all up at once. Have at it and binge like the mofo that you want to be, type of thing. So in a sense, they were smart in that sense to give the consumer what they wanted. However, it's now almost killing another part of the industry where things like live TV is dying off, or you use live TV in different ways. And then it just split up into like sports streaming and things like that. It's
Well,
so
this
in one sense, they gave people what they wanted. So then at one point, do we get the blame as well as consumers just for eating that up?
well, I don't know, man. I don't like. I don't. You don't blame the pets for their owners, right? Like you, and I didn't say just, we are the pets, but you like at I think the key part that to add to what you just said, which is what I said, it was at a one single low price. So you didn't pay per stream. You paid $8 a month or whatever, or $10 a month, or 12 or $14, whatever it is, a month for unlimited streaming, unlimited content, unlimited stuff. And so what they does is it dilutes and they provided that to you at an annual loss, right? So they provided you at an annual loss because the banks funded that loss annually. So you see where the problem happens? When you have the company giving you a low price, right, of $8.99 for unlimited streaming, that loss that they operate under comes out of the pockets of the workers in that industry. And once the financial stream ends, once the financial stream ends or dries out, when you enter a recession, when things are going so well, they cut everybody because they're already at a loss, right? They cut shows. So now even us, as the pets that we are, consuming the content, we'll watch a season, 2 seasons, we'll get really invested, and they'll cut the show. Why? What are you doing? Just finish the damn story. Give me a story. Why are you doing this? And they do this for the reasons that we just explained. And it's like, I don't know where you go when you keep shooting every industry in the foot. And only the industries, like these are the big ones. It's like you'll never hear about the military-industrial complexes strikes. Do they have any strikes and unions? Do they? I've never heard of a military-industrial complex strike. I've never heard of a prison-industrial complex. Oh no, do they strike?
I know
Oh,
prison workers, they have unions.
do they strike?
They've threatened in the past.
How'd it go?
Okay.
What lasted longer, the DVR or the BlackBerry? Because Rashid mentioned the very old TiVo technology. Like that was only around for 10 years, that DVR technology. What's it called? I forgot what I wanted to say.
Well,
Go ahead.
go ahead with what you were talking. Like that. So what? So that okay. Obviously, I took us on a bit of a thing about like other industries and what they do and how, but those other industries are super profitable and not operating under a loss and make a lot of money and yada yada. And I think that that situation even is more than AI. I feel like AI is the smokescreen for this discussion because I'm I think even for writers, I think for writers, I think AI helps. I think having a chatbot that helps refine work, get the first draft going, all that type of stuff, I think it's good news. I don't think writers are particularly like, this is going to replace me, only for short-sighted executives. Like short-sighted executives, yeah, that'll replace you, but you're also an idiot.
See, here's the thing though. I can't imagine they'd actually want to like permanently replace human writers with AI because they know there's an element that you need the nuance that a human can do when writing a script. Like, I think they're not that, I don't think they're that stupid.
I think they are. I think some of them are. Like, I think some of them are. I think you'd be surprised at how high you can get
No,
onto
that's the point I was gonna make is that like for what you just said, Rashid, about they picked up on the stream services with the DVR, they moved to the stream services. The one big sacrifice they made, which we haven't talked about yet with regards to writers Hollywood, is the box office, cinema. These executives, they didn't have any plan going ahead for the cinema experience, the movie going experience. So while they were quickly trying to make plans with their stream services and they were quick to advertise to Wall Street about their stream services, they weren't talking about the fact that a drink at the cinema costs $10 now and it's half the size. They're selling European sizes in American cinemas. It's ridiculous. And so the user experience, the cinema goer or the cinema going experience has actually decreased quite substantially. And the only one to blame in all of this is where it's the actual exec's job. This is the executive's job, right? Is to figure out all the rest of Hollywood, not the movie or the dialogue. It's all the rest of it. And they didn't do that. So these execs can absolutely be that myopic and that stupid and that greedy.
But the cinema experience, they've given you different levels of experiences. So you can go and do like the basic nosebleed experience where you just go buy a regular ticket, you go buy your popcorn for $15, or you buy your combo for $25, and you go and you don't have an assigned seating, you just sit in the top, like everyone used to do back in the day. But then you also can pay for the D box seats that like vibrate and move. And then there's now this 4D, whatever, where basically you're in the cinema and like the environment changes based with the screen. So if there's a breeze happening, you get this breeze smacking you in the face from it. And you're like, okay, I just want to watch a movie, man. I'm like, it's getting cold in here. Like, I hope it doesn't rain.
That was the point of the stream services. If I'm gonna pay for nosebleeds and be uncomfortable for the price of one uncomfortable movie, I can just sit at home and watch unlimited catalog.
Yeah. Now I won't go to the theater unless it's something that's like special effects. I'm not gonna go and sit there and watch a story. I'm gonna go and watch a movie that has special. The last one I went was, I think, the Spider-Man Far From Home one. I think it was that.
Yeah. Or
Avatar. You kind of have to watch
Yeah.
that in the theater. The Spider-Man before the one that's out now, the animated one.
Man, like for me, yeah, that was really good. Enter the Multiverse. And I saw
that one.
I saw that in 3D in theaters, and that was also the last movie I saw in theaters. And that movie came out like I think 8 years ago now.
It hadn't been that long.
Yes, it has.
It was like last winter or something.
Yeah, yes, it has. Look it up. It's been out for a very long time. Enter the Spideyverse. It's been out for a while. It's on Netflix now.
And that's the proof, you guys. Like, that's no one goes to the cinema anymore. And they didn't, this, what you mentioned, the breeze blowing or the 4D effects, this was very reactionary. And this was almost more reactionary to COVID than the ongoing, like, this crisis has been ongoing for 10 years. COVID just really exacerbated those
Yeah.
numbers. But like the trends for both cinema people going down and stream services going up, those have been holding for a while. COVID like really multiplied that. And the execs, again, to your point, none of them, it feels like none of them sat back during COVID time and figured out, okay, when this thing is over, this is what we're going to do. This is the path forward. Every one of them just said business as usual, or they were too busy. Forget it. Harvey Weinstein. Insert Harvey Weinstein joke.
Spider-Man Far From Home 2019. Been 4 years.
I was talking about
4.5.
I was talking about Enter the Spideyverse. I was talking about Enter the Spideyverse. That one, 4.5. Yes, old man. Everyone's always surprised, right? Because also the pandemic was only like a year long, but it was actually 3 years long. Because it was the same. It was the whole, you know. It's
And today we have those actors that were singing Imagine during the pandemic time lecturing us about workers' rights today. Look, the thing is with this, the Hollywood actors, absolutely, there's the people we're talking about who need the extra money, who are demanding the extra money, are the extras on set, and the people who are not on the poster or on the headline. Their name does not appear, they're not famous. But it is still quite rich that the rich are the first in line in these like picket fences, and they're the first ones. Like, why didn't you guys do anything for the last 20 years, 30 years? Even you, Will Smith, and the top earners, Tom Cruise's. If I asked you today to take a $10 million pay cut or to shave off 2 points on your contract for the post-production profits and give that to the crew, would you guys be willing to do that or no?
I think The Rock does that all the time. I just want to say that I think The Rock does.
There are some actors that
I think
give
there are actors
a lot
that
of their
do that,
cut,
and I think
but
even,
not everyone.
And I do think actually that sometimes they do that. Like sometimes Tom Cruise does something badass, even though but he like sometimes
Keanu Reeves does that kind of stuff.
Oh, he does that shit all the time. Yeah,
he does that shit all the time. He gives some kind of payback to the entire crew that's getting paid peanuts, basically.
And some of the actors, they become, and I guess this is part and parcel of the industry, is that like some of these guys, like some of these people are real divas, right? And when you're why? Because you're uber dramatic, and well, you should be an actor. Excellent, perfect. There's perfect room for you, and they actually put up with your shit.
Or a politician.
Yeah, they could switch over to that after. Sans Arnold Schwarzenegger, the genius behind everything. He's totally the guy behind it all. No, I think it's a very interesting topic. I think the Hollywood strike is really interesting. I think it's very interesting how all of these kind of come into play, how far they seem to be. Apparently in their negotiations, like they are not on the same planet. So they have
Oh, they're
like,
miles apart.
Yeah, the workers are like, are you kidding me, man? And but it's also because the execs, I think, they're not forthcoming about how much money they're making. How much are they streaming? What is like, or how much are they making, if any? And so what they're saying is, if we give you more money, then we will have to close our doors. That's what they're saying.
I just wanted one just different angle on this, and it's more of a question to MJ. Because who's the other world competitor to Hollywood? Bollywood. So I'm curious as to what that industry's opinion would be, or the workers within Bollywood, what their opinion would be, because of the fact that I can imagine their working conditions for people who would be writers and stuff would be worse than what we're talking about for the Hollywood people. And when you consider it seems like Bollywood's pumping out a movie like an hour. Boom, there's something coming
Yeah.
out every half an hour. It's like nonstop, and I'm like, how are they doing this?
There's a new dance sequence happening in front of us. Just look outside
Absolutely.
your window. I'm sure you'll see it. I don't think there's too much of a connection yet. Bollywood runs very much on nepotism. If you think Hollywood is nepo babies, Bollywood is nepotism to the nth degree, and it always has been since its inception. It's been passed to the kids. Hollywood too. They just cover it up a little bit better. But there's no connection because there it truly is what Wasim was saying about you need to be grateful. People there are grateful for any sort of chance to be even in the movie or on set. You're okay. Even if they could just give you zero food and they just give you lunch for the day, people will be. That was a great deal, man. I loved it. That day
Yeah.
was like my favorite.
Yeah.
So there's not too much.
yeah.
They're not demanding like that.
High fashion, I think, is also like that. The fashion industry is also like that. Like I now that I'm thinking about it, like a lot of these, not the Vogue, but the vanity industries, right? Like I call them the vanity industries. These vanity industries, they do all the same. Like you should be grateful for the opportunity to be breathing the same air that I'm breathing. Like I cannot believe the air of like smugness that you come walking in here and you think that you have a chance, like that, and you're asking for a livable wage. Like what am I asking you for? Like here, get out. Anything like divas.
It's
Have
also
you guys watched Only Murders in the Building?
Yeah.
Amazing. The one character that reminds what you described is what's her name? Cindy Canning, Tina Fey's character, the way she talks to her assistant. It's
100%. Yes.
That's like you were saying that. I'm like, boom, Cindy Canning in my head. It's right.
The part we haven't talked about in detail, we talked about the Chat GPT part of AI, by the way. But the part we didn't really get into is Rasha mentioned it in the Jane is awful, Joan is awful, one or the
Jane
other,
is
the
awful.
Black Mirror episode.
Yeah.
The AI acting. How do we feel about this? The morality, the ethics behind it, and the actual implementation. Would you guys be okay with Christopher Reeve becoming Superman all over again? Or Chadwick Boseman, for me, Black Superman, Chadwick Boseman becoming Black Panther. Well, if it's possible, should we do it or no?
See, first when that was in that show, when it came out, that's what was happening. The different layers of the AI generated person. I'm like, wait a second, who's the real person? Then you figure out who the real person is, right? Then I'm like, okay, I understand what's going on here. I thought Annie Murphy was the real girl the entire time. It was cool at first, but then I was like, I feel cheated though, to a certain extent. But that you mentioned that if you're doing the AI generated face and you could have Chadwick Boseman, for example, be Superman or something like that, would be pretty cool. But I don't know. In the end, I guess you as a viewer watching it, it doesn't really matter because someone would be like, but he wasn't actually physically doing it. But in the end, is it a good performance? Was the movie good? Really, I think that's what it comes down to in the end. Did they do a good job?
My tendency to shame you. Shame, Rashid. Shame.
Honestly, spoken like a true Hollywood executive. This guy. It doesn't matter. Was it?
You need one in every damn group, all right?
No, but even like, I think it's a great question. Do most people care? Does the end consumer, does it matter? Because like, for example, I'll give you a different example. Let's say we're going to do, they set up a show that's like it's a concert and it's Biggie and Tupac on the same stage, right? And I could think of a creative, it would be awesome. Would you watch it? Yes, you'll watch it. Would you care that they're like not there? Are you going to think about residuals and like, who gets the money from the show if it's very popular and stuff? Like But it seems like it puts way too much power into. What about new actors? What about new people that want to come through? Like, is it making it that much harder on like new players to get into the game? Is it just setting up a barrier where people only want to see Tom Hanks die every day? Like, they just want to see Tom Hanks die every day, or Tom Cruise, or whoever. Like, what? And then where does even like where do the actors like stop, and where does their likeness go? Does it all just go to them, and do they become super trillionaires because the residuals all go to them, and that's it? And then so if you made it, you didn't make it, too bad. That boat has sailed. There's no more making it.
That's actually a really good point, though, because what ends up happening, does it go to the person's beneficiaries, like Chadwick Boseman, for example, God rest his soul? Does it go to his beneficiaries? Does it go into his estate? Like, what ends up happening with those residual monies as well? If it ends up being
A
him
voice
as
or a
an
likeness
AI,
or a body, yeah.
whatever it is, right? So, like, that creates a huge conundrum.
Or even extending Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace, no doubt, is after he's passed. What if one of his family down the line decides to release his likeness to one of these companies? Or even worse than like your top A-level Hollywood is, what if they release his likeness, his image, his AI properties to Ozempic or some pharmacy pill? They are having a hard time. That person is no longer here. They've got the rights to it. They need money, so they sign it over to just anybody and they take money. Now, how far can this company take that likeness? How far can they take that image? Can they make him say anything they want from now on? Does that mean quite literally they own this AI property and they can just do with it what they want? It's so
Man.
weird. It's
Well,
so weird.
And we're having this discussion right now, and then what? Well, who's it? Who's expected to actually have this discussion right now and figure this out? Because someone's got to figure this out, right? Because part of me, I'm going, you know what? I kind of want to say, no, you're not allowed to do that. I want to say that the industry says, you know what? No, it'll handicap the industry so much to do that, that, and that's what sort of people in the industry, they want to set the legislation. So they're coming up, and that's why even with AI, they're trying to create alarm so that the legislation gets put down and that they write it. So that they write the legislation that gets put down. So they're trying to create alarm, and legislation is only going to get written while there's alarm. Because once there is no alarm, no one's going to give a shit about this legislation. No one's going to write anything. So on the one hand, I think that's happening. But then also when you have politicians are drastically underprepared to have this discussion. So when they were like talking to Mark Zuckerberg back in the day about the interference in and how much in the social media company allow for interference of foreign things and stuff, they didn't know what Google was. They didn't know what they didn't know anything. They would do you know how a phone works? I can't. And it was clear from their questions that they had no idea what they were talking about. And we're supposed to, and trust even the Supreme Court to weigh in on this. And these guys don't even know what phones look like, right?
Did you see the testimony, the Congress hearing between the Congress people and the TikTok CEO? The
Yeah.
young millennial TikTok CEO, and they're asking do you know how to turn my phone on and off? Basically, they're asking
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
from the TikTok
Can
CEO, is like, if I go to China and I turn my phone on, will you tell the Chinese government? Is it don't work like that. Like what
Yeah.
you're thinking, it don't work like that. Like you don't know what you're thinking. Like you haven't sat down and studied this stuff. You're intern, unpaid
Gave you
intern.
few
You
questions.
5 bullet points or questions, 5 bullet points to phrase into a question, or
And you're
5
reading them.
points to say in consternation, how dare you do this on American soil?
Yeah.
You're not really studying anything.
And then your entire goal is to clip it and take it back and say, look at how hard I am on tech. Look at how hard I am. Re-elect me. So you're a mouse running your little wheel. trying to get your sort of motivation and your agenda and your thing, whatever it is that you're trying to do, done. And so everybody's just playing their own motive, like playing to their own agenda naturally as they do. But what that actually, I think, leaves us is in, we're totally ill prepared to actually deal with these really big, not easy to answer questions, right? Like I could totally see the debate, the need for the debate of should we, like, I heard one thing that I thought was a very interesting idea with comes to AI, where we need to have the strictest punishments you could possibly imagine for people that deepfake other people without sharing or knowing. Like if I rip your voice, if I rip your likeness, if I do anything of that stuff and you get caught, like it can't be a slap on the wrist, right? It has to be horrible because because that's how serious that getting out of control is. To The time is now to set these types of things into play. And I'm happy that we're having this discussion because I think we are adding to the zeitgeist in terms of what we need to happen, right? Because I'm not prepared to have this discussion, right, with everybody. I'm not prepared to I'm not the right person, but I do think that there needs to be someone saying, no, you can't use this without disclosing this. Yes, you can use AI in this and not this as a result of open, transparent debate that we can all see and understand. Because like the way things are changing and the speed at which they're changing, I feel like it's almost impossible to even have this debate. But we have to try. We need to try and be demanding about this.
I just want to make a point before we start wrapping this up, because there's one aspect that we haven't really talked about that has really affected the conditions of the writers themselves. And that is what we keep on criticizing, the woke/cancel culture. So what ends up happening is that it ends up being restrictive as to what they can write. So like people would say that you watch comedians from like classic Eddie Murphy would not be published. Like he wouldn't be produced today.
Yeah.
He was way too offensive for today's world. There's no way. So what are they doing instead? And that's really pissing off a lot of the writers is they're doing redux of old stories, like She-Hulk, for example. I'm not saying it's bad, it's a good or a bad thing. All I'm saying is that they're not allowed. One of their biggest qualms is that they're not allowed to be as creative as they used to be. And there's a lot of restrictions being put on whatever dialogue or whatever topic that they want to tackle or discuss or write about. Like things change in the media, things change in the entertainment industry. For a long time, you didn't see interracial couples. Now it's become a lot more normal. And then things with the gender discussion, things have changed with that as well, and seeing different genders being represented and all that kind of stuff. But it seems like right now for the writers, they have to be writing shows or movies that fit within what is perceived to be accepted right now. And they're like, but you're killing my creative talent. Me as a writer, I'm supposed to be able to be creative. Like,
man, dude,
I'm shackled.
These people, they will like, and the thing is, even if you do that, because I think they do that, I think they cater to all of this stuff like crazy, right? Apparently, Disney's CEO, they're redoing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but there's no dwarves.
I saw
But
that.
there's no dwarves.
No dwarves except for
no
Peter
dwarves.
Dinklage.
Yeah, we don't allow
Apparently
dwarves
he
here.
was the one.
Yeah.
Apparently he was the one who was the most offended by it all being dwarves and whatever. But it's represented different genders and different ethnicities and all that kind of stuff. But then you think, wait a second, you start on a show where there
Fuck
was
you, Peter. You were a dwarf fan.
incest and killing and like rape and pillaging and all this kind of shit, and you're the one who's offended by this?
That's so
Really?
crazy. It's so crazy. What happens when you start to get full of yourself? Like the
And
higher
nobody
you
knew
go-
who he was before that.
Yes.
Nobody knew who he was before Game of Thrones.
And even like I think with the seven, it's all of this stuff is rich, right? Because you'll redo it so that it's more woke and more like this, and there's a big push for things to be more like, or there's the loudest voices usually are the ones that like make this and shame you for even thinking otherwise. creates a culture of shame for even like suggesting, pondering, bringing up a type of thing, which reminds me a lot of, and that's why I think a lot of the woke culture is the new religion, right? In the sense that, like, in my day when I was growing up in a traditionally religious society, yes, it was the same thing. I could not ponder out loud. I could not ponder any certain these things. And now it's the same, except it's a
Mhm.
whole other.
The box is different now.
It's a box there, but it's the same. It has the same.
It's the same
clothing.
restrictions.
Yeah, yeah. It's the same restrictions, and it goes like when you start when they're the way they're playing with this stuff. Okay, now let's not make them dwarves. Why? Because they can be more inclusive. Yeah, but what's wrong with dwarves? Like it's inherent in there. What's the problem with them being dwarves? Do you not like dwarves? Like, what's your issue with and then also what's rich about Peter Dinklage doing that is okay, you got the role, you did it, you made the big bucks, and now no one else can. Like it seems like a situation of pulling the ladder up behind you that you climbed up to success. It seems okay now nobody else can. And I heard a thing, the guy that plays Hoggle Woggle like on the WWE, and he was like, man, we only get 8 roles a year. There's only 8 roles written for dwarves, and even these we don't get to have. Like these, and they actually help Snow White. Like they're not villains. They're not like
Yeah.
it's actually a positive role. And even the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, when you think about it's so interesting. It's interesting because all of those fairy tales have like archetypes in them, and Snow White takes care of all of the sort of maybe let's call them the masculine traits, right? Like all 6 are like various all 7 dwarves are masculine traits, and she has to leave the woman and the apple and the falling asleep and when she's like asleep and like and waking up and there's a lot going on in there. It's an episode for another time, but I think it's interesting that you brought up that the fact that the that even with these so like the constraints that are put on by woke and cancel culture on the creative industry has actually stifled the creative industry and stifled the writers because they can't some of these people that cancel a movie or cancel a show or cancel this and are the loudest voices haven't even seen it. They don't watch the thing because they like was watching it as an act of violence and it triggers them and they're just they're they're so fragile, right? Like it might lead to tears. They can't handle this stuff. And you didn't even watch the movie, right? I remember when the Joker came out, and I remember people were like this incels and all this, and it makes incels look awesome, and it's all this shit. And you're like, you didn't watch a movie. You clearly didn't watch a movie. And you'll say you didn't watch the movie. How can you be so sure about the film and what it does when you clearly haven't watched the movie? And they go, I don't need to watch a movie. I'm like, oh, let me return to I'm a peasant. I don't understand anything. You clearly understand more than me. And in those academic circles, and and they're just so smart, man. What do I know? I don't. What do I know? Let me go back to harvesting and shepherding sheep. I'm gonna go back to that. Let me go back.
With regards to the woke and cancel culture, we also need to remember we've been programmed by Hollywood to believe that Hollywood is left-leaning and very liberal and very cool and stuff, but history shows us that it's very right-leaning and they often give in to the establishment very quickly. In terms of the 50s and 60s Red Scare with Joseph McCarthy, one Ronald Reagan was the first snitch to sell out half of Hollywood, including Dalton Trumbo and stuff, the House of Un-American Activities and stuff like that. And oh, they're Reds, and oh, they're liberals, and oh, they're homos. And they tried to cull all of Hollywood. And so they did get rid of a lot of leftists and left-leaning thinking in Hollywood within that time. And Hollywood helped. Hollywood was the first to snitch on its own. Then even after 9/11, there's many links of blockbusters and the giant action movies that Rashid loves being wholly sponsored by the American military industrial complex that Wasim dearly loves. And these are known links. There's no conspiracy about this. This is a known. The army went to Hollywood and said, "Hey, we recruitment problems and America, and we need you guys to help us." And they came out with a whole bunch of action stars and action movies and Durga Muhammad Jihad, if anyone remembers World Peace.
Oh yeah, Dirk. Give him the sign. I give him the sign.
One mere mention,
But the
and
thing,
they start going up. You can't
but no,
control them.
but no, it's true because you know what? There's documents going back to the 50s and 60s that demonstrates the purpose of Hollywood, which is to program people's minds. And what they're programming people's minds for changes with time. But generally speaking, it's an act and it's in a practice of controlling population. If you want to get to the most extreme edge of the conspiracy theory, really, and where's a lot of people, but it really is. And if you don't recognize the fact that your mind is being manipulated by what's being produced and shown on your screens, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And it's up to you to decide. Now, you have to have your own critical mind thought now to decide, okay, I know this TV show is bullshit. And I know what they're trying to sell to me. And they're trying to make me accept a certain reality that I don't necessarily want. That can be various things. But in the end, that's their purpose. That's what they do. But you as a consumer, you have to learn how to be able to think for yourself still at some point. God forbid you have your own brain.
Yeah, think for yourself. Don't listen to us. What do we know? Thanks for coming in. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you subscribed and share this episode with anybody, and I hope it's added something to your life. Thanks for listening to the end. Peace in the Middle East.